Welcome to the All the Hats We Wear podcast. This is a show that will help you learn the time management skills you need to be joyful, productive, and fulfilled in all areas of life. I'm your host, Scott Snow, life coach, productivity expert, and professional speaker. We have a fascinating guest today for the show. Lucas Vining is a scientist, entrepreneur, and student. He founded his first company, Ichosia Biotechnology, to commercialize novel stem cell and genetic engineering technologies. He has more recently started a social nonprofit venture, Sakom Farms, to alleviate poverty and promote education in his native country, Cambodia. Between the two ventures, he has personally raised collectively over $240,000 in non-dilutive funding through a combination of grants, awards, and regional, national, and international prizes. Please welcome Lucas Vining.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Thank you so much for having me.
Would you tell us about your company, Ichosia Biotechnology?
Yeah, so Ichosia Biotechnology is developing a method of growing red blood cells from stem cells all in a laboratory. And we do this by implementing novel genetic engineering techniques. And so essentially the idea is that if we can grow clinically significant quantities of these stem cell derived red blood cells in the lab, we can use these lab grown cells to replace donor blood in clinical transfusions, right? And in doing so, we can get rid of all of the donor blood related problems. So we can get rid of any possibility of scarcities. We can get rid of any risk of pathogen contamination, and we can get rid of any issues related to cross matching and compatibility. And so, even in the United States, which has one of the most developed and one of the best blood supply chains in the world, we have some of these problems. But so then you can only imagine how the blood supply looks like in some countries that don't have these systems in place, a lot of developing nations, and honestly, even some developed nations. So for example, China has very severe blood shortages, and they actually, it's so bad that they have a black market for blood. It's really interesting. So these problems they're not just U.S. problems. They're problems that present themselves all over the world because blood's needed all over the world. And so essentially, the way our technology works is that we take stem cells and we induce them to transform into red blood cells. And for some of your listeners who aren't biologists, it might surprise you to learn that we didn't invent that process. Actually, scientists have been able to do that for quite a few years now. But what all of that research has shown is that it's incredibly difficult to do. It's hard to scale and it's not cost effective. And that's why we still collect donor blood. We don't grow all of our blood in a lab. So the way our genetic engineering process works is we take that stem cell that essentially it doesn't want to be a red blood cell. It wants to stay a stem cell, wants to stay as it is. And the stem cell takes a lot of outside convincing, a lot of outside push from the researchers to make it turn to red blood cell. What our genetic engineering strategy does is it essentially convinces that stem cell that it wants to turn to red blood cell. It makes that process easier to do, makes it scalable and economically feasible.
The title of the podcast here is All the Hats We Wear. So what are some of the other hats you wear as CEO?
Yeah, so we're a very small company, at least with respect to other life sciences and pharmaceutical companies. So we currently have 6 team members. And so what that means is that everyone shares in all the responsibilities, especially as CEO, especially the C-suite. So I'm a molecular biologist myself, so I'm the one who developed the foundation of this research. And at first, my entire day was developing research protocols. I never ended up doing any of the lab research myself, but I did do a lot of the coordination with our contract research organizations and explaining our protocols to them, answering any questions that they have. So very much in the weeds in the science. I lead more of our fundraising efforts. So, talking with investors, a lot of pitch competitions. Then also that includes writing grants. So a lot of academic grants for the federal government and other private foundations. But those grants want to know a lot about science. So I still have to be aware of that. I get to do some things that, well, maybe some people consider them fun, but I think most people consider them less fun, right? So accounting, that sort of thing, maintaining financial health. Team management. I do things all over the company, and that's really too not limited to biotechnology. That's the way it is at many early stage startups.
I think I discovered a YouTube video, an old one of you as a kid doing a science experiment. Was that you measuring the weight of corn kernels?
Yeah, yeah, surface tension, and I think seventh grade. Me
Wow.
and my buddy Anthony. Yeah, I think that's up to like 7,000 views now. So become quite popular since then.
Right. So you've always been passionate about science.
Yeah, yeah, I've always been a scientist. I was the kid who got a microscope for Christmas. I actually when I got to high school, I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And I took a year of biology freshman year, and I absolutely hated it. I thought it was awful. I didn't understand anything that was going on. I was like, I'm never taking another biology class again. Um, and then I took chemistry, and I didn't hate it, but I realized I wasn't very good at it. So I realized chemical engineering wasn't for me. And then I had this realization, sort of probably my junior, maybe my senior year, that the manifestation of a particular subject in class was not representative of that subject in its entirety. And I had a great skill that I think I'm very fortunate to have, in that I can learn a lot just from reading on my own, doing googling, doing my own research. And when I started doing that, I started looking into a lot more of the topics in biology, especially molecular biology. I realized that I actually thought it was really interesting. And so a lot of the my scientific understanding actually comes not from school, but from me just being curious and doing a lot of reading. So yeah, anyway, I've always been a scientist. I've always loved learning about science.
While preparing for this interview, I discovered a theme of that you don't wait to have all the answers. You tend to dive headfirst into what you're doing and your passions, and then you learn as you go, as you just were mentioning. Is this accurate?
I like to think that it's a mix of sort of diving head first, and that, but also doing my research and making sure that there's something there before I devote too much time, energy, or resources into it. I do think with Ichosia, starting a company, it's not as high risk as people think necessarily. There's a lot of variables that impact that. But for me, it wasn't particularly high risk, right? So the worst that happened, and I will say this changes once you have investors. But for a while, we didn't have investors. But so when we first started, it was me and two of my friends from university, and the worst that could happen was that our science didn't work, or we couldn't get any money, and we had to dissolve the company, which is a relatively straightforward process. And we had a good resume builder. That was the absolute worst outcome.
Right.
And I had a good story. Once you have investors, it's a little different, right? Because people will be very mad at you if you spend all their money and then you don't have anything to show for it.
Right.
But even then, investors understand that I think that the ratio that they expect is like 1 in 5 of their investments to succeed for startup investing. So they still understand that there is risk involved, and that usually even it won't go right. So I would say I'm definitely not afraid of starting something new without all the answers. But no, I think it's definitely an important thing to do a bit of research first, and making sure an idea is good. And actually, I think that's definitely one of the biggest ideas that one of the biggest problems that I see with a lot of younger companies, especially student companies, that people have these ideas that they think are great, but they won't vet them first. They won't go through any sort of customer discovery process. They'll just start building their app, and then a year later, they've spent hundreds of hours building this app, and they find out no one wants it. So I think it's a mix of both strategies.
Right. What's your process for getting that idea out there and testing it?
Yeah, and this is definitely something that I learned over time. And if I were to start another company, maybe I will someday in the future. This is definitely the first step that I'd take that I was not wise enough to do when I started Ichosia. But the best thing that you can do, and it's great too because it's free in general, is going out and talking to your potential customers that you think you'd be selling to, or other industry players, whether that's partners, suppliers, even competitors are great to talk to, especially if they don't know that you're a competitor yet. They'll tell you a lot of things, and you can by doing these interviews, you can get a lot of understanding about, all right, is my idea, will anyone care if I build it? And then sort of, how can it fit into the market? And if it's not a market idea, maybe it's something like a podcast, I'm planning to sell it. But will anyone listen to it? Will anyone care what we're talking about? That sort of thing. And yeah, so, just I went out and I did all this like cold email, because at this point I'm like 18, so I don't have a network yet, right?
Yeah.
I don't know anyone, so it's just a lot of cold emailing, a lot of cold calling, and people respond. It's a numbers game. Eventually, you get enough people to respond. If you go out and you talk to them, even though it's weird, right? You say, "Yeah, I'm this 18-year-old, and I have this idea, and I'd like to talk to you about it." And they're like a physician, and they're busy, right? So it's weird, honestly. But they will talk to you, and you can get a much better understanding of not. And I think it's not only is this a good idea or a bad idea. It's not that polar. It's also, how will this idea manifest itself when I'm trying to build it, when I'm trying to get it into market. So yeah, a lot of conversations. And then after that, then I sort of go into, well, maybe in parallel, we do a lot of feasibility analysis, like, is the science there? At this point, maybe all the science is theoretical, but doesn't make sense. We say we've finished these first couple of experiments that we've planned. Is there a path to get from that point through clinicals, and going through a really deep dive on feasibility? And so actually, when we first started, for I guess probably the first 2 years, all of our research was theoretical, but we had our experiments planned, to the day for several months at a time, which is really useful, because when we're writing grants or going to business competitions or whatever it is, or just talking to people about our ideas, we're saying, yeah, we have everything figured out. We have our market analysis done. We have all these people in industry telling us it's a great idea. They'd love to see it. We have all the research planned out with great detail. The only thing that's holding us back now is money. So please give me your money.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are the main steps.
Now, I know with the biotech industry, we always think of 12-hour days, 7 days a week. So let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. How do you keep sane, and how do you approach work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the same way anyone else does, and I think that the key to not overworking is, and you really can't make this up, is loving what you do. And when I say you can't make this up, I mean you can't make up loving what you do. You can't force yourself to love what you do. So I think, for me, it's not. I don't feel like I'm working 12 hours a day. I absolutely do that, or more, but it doesn't feel like I'm pushing myself every day. I'm just sort of doing what I love to do every day. But I think the other piece of that is, yes, absolutely. In biotech, in a lot of industries, I should say a lot of startup environments, in any industry, 100-hour weeks, 120-hour weeks are not uncommon. They're expectable. But I think the thing that you have to realize, especially if you've never done it before, is that, yeah, sometimes 100-hour weeks are necessary and you have to go and do it. But sometimes they're not. And I think sometimes when I was first starting, I felt like I had to be working 100 hours a week, no matter what. And then if I kind of ran out of work sometimes, and I just feel anxious, like I just have to be doing something. I've only hit 80 hours this week. But I think I've started to realize that sometimes there's just no more work to be done, and it's okay to sit down and take a break. And I'm really fortunate now that I don't have to work 100-hour weeks every week. Sometimes I do, and I know that I can do that, but sometimes I don't, and that's great. The other thing is, I think building routine, and enjoying the people that's around you, whether that's at home, at work. I think just being around the people that you like, that make you happy, can do a lot, to just sort of brighten your life, as cliche as that might sound. And then, yeah, on the note of routine, I think we've probably all sort of seen those talks that say, make your bed in the morning, and that's the great. For me, that doesn't really work. I don't make my bed every morning. I do it when I feel like it. But I think routine is good, and everyone should figure out what their own routine is that makes them happy. So, for example, what I do is, I play a game of chess every morning. That's my morning thing. And that it's a great way to start off the day. I'm a little superstitious about it. Sometimes I feel like if I win the game, I'm gonna have a better day than if I don't win the game. But yeah, but in general, I think it's a lot of finding what works for you. It's not a one solution fits all kind of thing. But
Interesting. Well, let's talk about productivity. What are some of the apps and software programs that you and your team use?
yeah, so again, we're only 5 or 6 people, but I found that team management software is great. So we use ClickUp in particular, but there's lots. There's Asana. There's well, Slack is kind of a team management software, and I think that just helps me stay organized, right? So I know all these 5 people or 6, including myself, we all have all these various things going on. They interconnect in various ways, and it's too much stuff to just remember when things need to get done. Um, so having that very visual organization is incredibly helpful. But the other thing is that builds accountability for my team, right? They know that I'm expecting them to do certain things by certain days. Similarly, they know that I'm expecting myself to do things by certain days, and they can hold me accountable. And I think accountability is definitely, it has to be a two-way street, or else it kind of looks like a dictatorship, right? So I think that's certainly very helpful. We also, again, I think that this is partially because we're a very small team, we're a very informal team. We don't use a system like Slack. We don't have a messaging app. We don't. Most of our communications don't run through email. We just text each other when we need stuff, and I find that is much faster than anything else. I mean, in general, I have my Apple Watch. In general, if you text me, I know it right then, and I'll probably respond to you right then, unless I'm on a call or something. But the other thing is my team then knows that if I don't respond to you in a couple of hours, it's probably because something's gone wrong or I'm extremely busy or something, and they know to follow up. So yeah, I think with email, it's sort of like, oh, someone didn't get back to me in a couple days. They might have just overlooked it. But I think it definitely helps us to work much more efficiently. And it all makes us much more accountable with one another.
It's obvious that you like thinking big. So, what's your process for creating an exciting vision, and what's your approach to goal setting?
Yeah, well, I think that this goes back to sort of diving in without thinking about it too much, or without having all the answers. I won't say without thinking about too much, but without having all the answers. So I think definitely it is vision. It's not necessarily plan. Um, so for Ichosia, it was, there's this great theoretical way of making it so that this system, this blood donor system that stood for 100 years, that we don't need to do that anymore. I think that's what we find really exciting, is this vision that we can change something that stood for so long and that impacts so many people. And then after that, after we've all smiled for a little bit about how great this could be, then it's really diving into, okay, wait, how's this going to work? Take a step back. But I think it's that overarching vision that helps carry us through doing all that day-to-day work. But I think the key to vision is, it is vision sets plan. It can't be the other way around, because if your methods and your plans set your vision, I think it's going to feel much more. You're not going to love what you do. I think it's just not going to be as fun. I think at first I probably spent a little too much time daydreaming about how great things could be, but that still carries me through my day now. So I don't think it's that bad.
And I
But
guess too, with having a big vision or something that's new that hasn't been done, there's an element. Of course, you have to be prepared and have your education in line, but also you're not going to be able to know what holes to fill in until you start doing the pursuit of the dream, right?
yeah, definitely. I think that's like the biggest, or one of the biggest problems, is that people want to build the whole plan before they start. You just got to start, and the plan will kind of fill itself in as you go, and you'll learn a lot more about your industry or whatever particular thing you're doing, and it'll bring itself together, even though it feels like it won't at the time. And even like kind of having that insight, having that have happened in the past, it still feels weird to say, all right, we're just going to start and I'm relatively confident it'll all come together at some point. Um, yeah, it's
I
an skill.
I wonder what percentage of people that are working, are really doing something they're not passionate about. And, what percentage of people are super passionate like you or I, and what's the percentage of people that are just, working really not doing in fault to their own, but somewhere along the line, they haven't found that, being a kid and doing a science experiment and being really passionate about it and then carrying it through.
Yeah, I think probably it's unfortunately higher than you or I want to think it is.
Right.
Um, but yeah, well, I think the other thing too is that it's easy. Passion is a dynamic thing. It's not this might not be my passion in 10 years. I
Right.
don't know. But I like to keep tabs on it. So sort of, is this, think about it, is this still something I love to do? Um, and there's nothing wrong with changing your passion. You know, Scott, I don't know what your passion is, but yeah, I imagine it might not have been the same thing 10 years ago. I don't know.
That's right. Yep. Or like in my case, I think it sort of took a natural progression. Originally it was music and being a musician, and then it became, a music therapist, and then a life coach, and then I figured out a way to combine all of my musical experience and everything that I believed about music and apply it to a time management system. So,
Sure.
and I think of it as, thinking like a musician. It's like a time management system created by a creative musician. So you
Yeah.
have, just like as a scientist, you have a different way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually on the note of sort of saying I'm actually a musician myself. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm not enough to be a professional musician definitely, but that's another thing that I love to do. That sort of just if I have 10 minutes in between meetings, I'll play a quick song or something. Yeah, so breaks are important. Small.
Yes. It's obvious that you're very passionate about your nonprofit, Sacom. Would you give us an overview of your mission?
Yeah, so Stockholm Farms, it aims to alleviate poverty in Cambodia. And the way that we do that is through the implementation of new hydroponic farming technologies. So for a bit of context, I'm Cambodian. I was born in Cambodia and I was adopted and brought to the United States when I was, less than a year old or so. And I've always sort of wanted to go back and do some sort of development work in Cambodia. Um, and yeah, sort of like we were talking about earlier, I think for a long time it sort of felt like, well, what am I going to do? I'm one kid. I study biology. I don't know how that would possibly play a role in international development work. What am I going to do? If USAID can't do it, what am I going to do? But then I think sort of through my work at Ichosia, well, Icosia's work is essentially, our genetic engineering strategy is identifying inefficiencies in a production process and making them more efficient. That's what we do at Stockholm too. I think it's like 70% or so of Cambodia's agriculture market, or excuse me, 30% of Cambodia's economy is in agriculture. Of that, like 70% is in rice agriculture. And rice is an awful thing to grow in Cambodia. It's not a great thing to grow anywhere. But in Cambodia in particular, the land's not good for growing rice, or honestly for growing most things. So what we saw is, okay, so, oh, and also, of course, the majority of people in poverty in Cambodia also are in agriculture, working on small farms or in subsistence farming of their own. But so what we saw is, this is a country that has an economy based on agriculture, but their agriculture economy has no industrialization and is wildly inefficient. We in the United States know how to make agriculture, at least somewhat efficient, or more efficient than doing everything by hand. And by implementing these hydroponic towers, which are, I think it's like 10 times more efficient than traditional farming, what we can do is we can make so that one person grows more, sells more, and we can pay that one person exponentially more than they would make in traditional farming. I think it was very much the same mindset as building Ichosia as was building Stockholm. Is we saw this inefficiency and created a method for making it more efficient. And so far we've built our pilot farm. We actually just put in an order this morning to start building our next farm. We have 2 employees. We're hoping to get that up by 20 next year. And yeah, so it's really exciting. It's really exciting work. I am just a board member, so I don't deal as much in the day-to-day work. My day-to-day is pretty much completely dedicated to Ichosia, but it's really exciting work. It's another thing that I absolutely love to do.
And I love your stipulation that the recipients of this need to still have their kids go to school instead of being
Yeah,
laborers.
yeah. That's actually something that's kind of a program that we haven't exactly implemented yet. Um, Primarily because, well, of our two employees, one doesn't have kids and the other's kids are already in school. So we haven't done a lot to improve anyone's life there. But it's definitely one of the education programs that we want to implement when we have 20 employees. The other thing that we're hoping to do is actually not only make stipulation that our farmers' children go to school, but actually try to send our farmers to school as well. Because I mean, no, honestly, yeah, I think we can do something great in poverty alleviation by paying these people enough that they're not in poverty. But it's not really a long-term solution. I don't think that agriculture is a long-term poverty alleviation solution. So what we want to do is employ all 20 of these employees half-time and then pay for them to go to university the other half time and essentially cycle them through in cohorts. So you'll work for us for 4 years and you'll get your degree, and we'll help you get a bank account, because we're giving you more money than you want to keep under your pillow. And then we'll help you move on and go get a job. You get a higher paying job somewhere else. And then we're going to cycle in a new cohort of farmers, make sure their kids go to school, make sure they go to university or trade school, whatever they want to do, and keep the cycle going and build a bigger impact that way.
Now, given all of the business pitch contests that you've won, it seems you really have a knack for communicating your ideas. So, what are some secrets for our listeners for communicating effectively?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is to understand that your idea probably isn't that complex, or at least it doesn't need to be that complex, right? So there is a way to describe it such that the average person will understand. But you have to test that. A lot of people assume that they've reached that point, but they probably haven't. I think the gold standard is, right, it's like the grandma test. Explain to your grandma, see if she can explain it back.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that my grandma thinks that I donate blood for a living. So maybe I'm still getting there as well. But yeah, I mean, your idea is really not that complex. I mean, with Saw Comb, it's really interesting. So our business model is incredibly simple. We grow lettuce, then we sell lettuce. That's it. There's nothing else. But people always, even like judges, they'll say, "Wait, I don't understand. So is there like an app involved?" I'm like, "No, no app. Is there, is there some deep technology involved?" No, like you're making it way more complex than it needs to be. And it's a little different than we were talking about. The point is, it's not that complex. You just have to figure out how to make it not sound that complex. So for example, right, with Ichosia, with our blood product, I could talk about, how we're doing genetic engineering, we're working with these very technical types of stem cells, we're manipulating these genes in these ways, and that would, bore people to death. Instead, what I say is, you have blood, it does this great thing. There's a really big challenge in getting blood for other people. We make blood. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Right? So I think it's sort of, and I think a lot of people don't like to do it because they like to show off how smart they are and how brilliant their idea is. And don't get me wrong, I like to do that too.
Right.
But when you're communicating the idea, it's really important to make it easy to understand.
And you seem to have a very easy way of presenting. Is that something you worked at, or are you just pretty comfortable from the beginning?
I definitely, I was sort of, is a talent I was given with. I can just talk. But I definitely work on it. Every single pitch is an opportunity to get better. I think, I think earlier you'd mentioned sort of goal setting for myself. The goal is always first place. So when we finish a pitch competition, if we well, actually, I'd say even if we do win first place, we'll spend a little bit more time congratulating ourselves. But 5 minutes after it's done, we go into review. Similarly to how athletes do. We'll look at the recordings of the pitch in the Q&A session, and we'll say, what could we have done better? And even if we won, it's what could we have done better? Because there's always potential to improve. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just important to understand that even the best pitcher, they're the best presenters, they're not above that. There's always opportunity to get better and to improve. So anyway, it's definitely something that I've worked on over time, but I am lucky that I'm somewhat as good at this from the start.
Hmm. And you seem like a very confident person too. Do you have to kind of put on a face if you're not sure about something, or do you just work on, being able to be confident about things?
I think it depends. Sometimes it's very much appropriate to just seem confident, even though internally I might have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I find actually like in some Q&A sessions, we're 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 always confident with our answers. Even when the answer is I don't know, we say it in a very confident way.
Yeah.
It's really important to do that because I think there's sort of I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but an intangible sort of ineffable quality that if I'm confident in my company, the investor will be confident in my company too. Even beyond the sort of the logistics and the feasibility of things, is you have to have a leader who at least seems like they know what they're doing. Even though in reality, I think a lot of leaders most of the time don't know what's going on just as much as everyone else doesn't know what's going on. But I think so. I think there definitely is that aspect, but I think also I am a relatively confident person. I think I can't forget who said it, but I think someone said all entrepreneurs are crazy, right? So to have this because again when we started there was no science. It was all just up here. All these experiments that who knows if they're going to work. Speaking of confidence, I don't know. But we went out and we told people we were very sure they were going to work and that they should give us their money to prove them they were going to work, and they did. But you have to be kind of crazy to go out and do that, to have no idea what the outcome's going to be and go for it anyway. So
What's your process for consuming the daily news?
yeah, so there's there's two important pieces. There's morning and evening. So every morning I get an email from, I get mine from the Morning Brew. Is one of those, like 5-minute read summary of news things. And the Morning Brew is focused on tech and business, which is where most of the most important news for me lies, with some politics in there too, but mostly related to tech and business. And, and I'm not so proud of this piece. But the other piece of my news that it comes from is like the Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Okay.
At the end of the day, that's where I get the other like half of my understanding. I'm not the kind of person who spends a lot of time watching the news. I really just don't have the time for it.
Okay. I'm always interested to see what people's process is.
Yeah, it's maybe not the most academic process, but I think it keeps me informed well enough.
Yeah, that's great. Besides your companies, what are some of the other hats you wear?
Yeah, yeah, my companies take up the vast majority of my time. I do think it's important to make time for family. Like I said, it's I'm lucky in that I don't have to work 100-hour weeks every single week. So I get to spend time with my girlfriend. When my parents come down to Washington for Father's Day, I get to visit them. So I think it's sort of the hat of just being a person that other people want to spend time with. It's in a way, it's a role of its own. But yeah, it's definitely a role that you have to put time and energy into. So.
And it sounds like you're definitely a chess enthusiast as well.
I am. Yeah, I love chess.
I've discovered backgammon. I'm really into backgammon.
Okay, I don't know how to play backgammon, but I've heard Go is quite the other great game for chess players that people seem to enjoy.
Yeah, right. What's a hobby or interest that may surprise others?
Yeah, it's a good one, a good question. I think a lot of people are surprised that I'm a musician. At some point in my life, I played like 7 instruments or something.
Hmm.
I don't anymore. I can like kind of play the guitar. I can kind of play the piano. Um, I I don't know. I might be able to remember how to play the violin. We'd see. But I think people. Well, maybe it's not interesting that I'm a musician. That I play a lot of instruments. But that it's all also mostly self-taught. Um, I think people find a lot of these types of subjects very daunting, right? So definitely a lot of things in science. People, would be scared to pick up a physics textbook and start reading. But also a lot of musical instruments. I'm not sure sort of what your experience has been, but I think people tend to think that there's that there's a right way to do it, and the experts know, and the experts will tell you. Um, but personally, I think a lot of that can be gathered just from reading, from watching the experts do it, not necessarily telling you explicitly, but just watching. Um, so yeah, I just think it's sort of that self-taught aspect is something that surprises people.
What's your process for prioritizing the week with your team?
So I think on the note of routine, I try my best to maintain routine, and that's it breaks a little from time to time based on when people want to have meetings when, and dealing with people in Cambodia who want to talk at 3 in the morning and whatever it is. But in general, what I try to do is take meetings in the morning, Monday through Thursday. I try to do morning meetings. Um, the second half of the day is usually catching up with my research team, making sure that I'm fully aware of the experiments going on. And I think I try not to micromanage, but I think I do take an approach that not necessarily every executive takes. And I want to know what experiments going on every single day. And I want to hear how it went the next day. Um, so a lot of that, and then a lot of sort of catching up on the work that I hadn't had the chance to do yet. Mostly, just by myself. And then Fridays, I try to reserve just for catching up on all things I didn't get done through the rest of the week, or any phone calls that didn't quite make it in. And actually, it's kind of the same for Saturday and Sunday too. It's just sort of like miscellaneous stuff that didn't quite make it in, or projects that have been put off for a long time. But I think my team, we're very small. We were all very familiar with one another, and we're all comfortable, doing meetings at 7 a.m. if we need to, 9 p.m. if we need to, and adjusting to each other's schedules. So I think we do have a preset routine. We have weekly meetings, but we have to be okay breaking those routines from time to time, in a way that's even part of the routine, if that makes any sense at all.
Right. I love the mission for your company, which is imagine a world where we no longer rely on blood donors. How do you stay committed to that mission over stretches of time where maybe you have disappointment or things are taking a long time to happen and that sort of thing?
So I think that's well, I don't want to talk about anyone else's company or experience, but I think that might be particularly difficult for us, because, as I mentioned, this is an FDA regulated product, so we have to go through bench work, just mixing stuff together at the lab bench. Then we have to go into animal models, and then we have to go into a multi-year clinical trial before finally making it into the clinic, commercially, and selling our product and saving lives. So there's this huge stretch of time where we're not we're not directly changing anyone's life, right? And our mission is very much about changing the world, changing people's lives. And so I think it can be tough in the day to day of feeling of having that feeling. And I think at the beginning that's something that I wanted to feel every day like I was building towards saving someone's life, or whatever it is. But I think sort of the internal mission for me has changed. I think the company's vision is the same. The company's vision is still to create a world where we don't need blood donors. Absolutely. But for me, what I get excited about every day, when I'm doing the accounting or doing the lab research or whatever it is I get excited that we're doing something big. And my team laughs at me because like big's not a super descriptive adjective. But I think it's a very simple way of saying it. I think it's the most accurate way of saying it. I want to do something big. I want to do something that's cool, something revolutionary. It's really it's not that complex. And I do feel like we're doing that every day. We're building towards something cool, something big. So I think that also, it ties back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a dynamic thing. The way that you see yourself in your company and staying excited about what you're doing, making sure you still love what you're doing. And I think if there was a day when I didn't love what I was doing, I would just stop doing it. No, I wouldn't just like full stop, just step away and like leave everyone else to dry. Um,
Mhm.
but if there ever comes a day when I'm not the right person to lead the company, either because you know I've spent too much time with the company or because we're at a stage where I'm just not the best person to lead it, I think that's okay. I'm My goal is to make sure that the company makes it to the clinic and can do something big. But if someone else is a better person to get us there, that's okay with me.
I love hearing about creativity and the creative process. Have you had any examples of, like maybe unrelated field that you had an idea that you could apply to whatever problem you're having with your business? Maybe you watch an NBA game and, they say something that makes you think about something, or it could be watching kids play, and creatively. Have you had any experiences like that?
Yeah, well, I think the best example is Sagam where I don't know anything about agriculture. I mean, I've never planted anything in my life. I've all those plants my girlfriend's plants. I don't know anything about agriculture. Um, yeah, so basically, I didn't know anything about what was going on. I like kind of knew about hydroponics work. I knew it involved water. Um, but what I didn't know is that there was an efficiency problem, and it's sort of looking back at that coach and saying, "Oh, we solve an efficiency problem. If we solve an efficiency problem here, we can solve all these other problems in poverty and education and whatever." So it's sort of like, oh, the two completely technically unrelated situations, but at their core, they both come down to inefficient processes.
Hmm.
You make something more efficient, you can do all sorts of crazy things that you might not even think of. So then, after that, then there comes the feasibility analysis. But I think there was sort of this light bulb moment where, oh, I already run a company where all we do is increase efficiency. We can transition that over to something else. It's very similar, even though it's technically very different.
That's a great point. How do you manage large projects?
By breaking them down, itemizing, taking it day to day. As I mentioned, when we first started, we had these multi-month experiments, but we had planned out day one, this is what happens, day two, this is what happens. And so there has to be a path to get to the end, right? And if you think about it, our research it's just a huge project. It's potentially a decade-long project, but we have to know all the steps that are going to get us there and how they all come together. And I think really, if you, and it's hard, you have to take the time to do that and figure out how all the pieces will connect to one another, how A leads to B leads to C. But I think if you do that, you can build a pretty strong roadmap to reach your goal. So I mean, that's really all we do, whether it's for a multi-stage research project that's going to span several years, or if it's just in month-long, market analysis projects. It's all about breaking it down.
Where can people go to get more information on your companies?
Yeah, so Ichosia's website is Ichosia, ICHOSIA.com. And Saakom's website is SAAKOM as in monkey.org. Both websites, also link to our social medias, our LinkedIn's, Instagrams, Twitters, etc. Facebook, I don't think we have Twitter actually. So those are definitely great places to start. Also, if any of your viewers are interested in learning more about me or my companies, please have them feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm generally very responsive, and especially if you're thinking about starting a new company or have questions about certain things, I love mentoring budding entrepreneurs as well. So I love taking questions. I like to think I'm very accessible.
That's great. Have you found any social media platforms to be especially helpful?
It depends. So when we were first starting at Ichosia, we wanted a lot of college interns, and a lot of college interns are on Instagram, or people look for internships. And so I basically just like followed my whole school, and then one day I said, I need interns, and we got like dozens of applicants in a day. It was great. Um, However, if you're looking for PhD level scientists, Instagram's probably not the best place to go. LinkedIn is probably the place you want to go. If you're looking for donations, probably something like Facebook. Um, so no, I am no marketing expert. I hate marketing. On the list of things I have to do, it's my least favorite. I don't really understand it. There's some people who are really great at it. I'm sure there's some great resources out there about which social media platforms are best for what. But in my experience, those have been the best for each.
My final question is what's one action our listeners can take to lead a more fulfilling life?
I think it's all about finding what you love to do. And that does not mean finding what company you'd love to start necessarily. I mean, if it is, it's great. I like starting companies, cool. But it's also about finding the little things, finding that song throughout the day that you want to play, finding your early morning chess game, finding people that you want to be around and spend time with at the end of your 100-hour week, if there's an end. And I think a lot of people already know themselves that much. They know what they love to do. They know what makes them happy, but they don't take the time or the. I shouldn't say that too, because sometimes people don't have the time, whether it's because they're working so much or have other commitments, whatever. But they don't find ways to make those things happen in their lives. So make that happen. Find what makes you happy in the day to day, even the small things.
I love that. Well, Lucas, you've given us a lot of ideas to think about, and I think the listeners are really going to like this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again, Scott, for having me.